I really sincerely believe that. Because if you watch that video, you realize the power of what it is we have to sell. It's not a difficult sell. If we could bring all of Dallas in front of that video, we'd have millions of supporters at the end of a 5-minute clip. If the American people really knew the truth, then we would have millions of supporters overnight. And that's what we are selling. The truth. It's not a hard sell. It's not like that ghastly drink you have here, Dr. Pepper, which advertises itself. Sure, it does, at least in Britain, it advertises itself as, well, what's the worst that could happen? If you drink our drink, what's the worst that could happen? We're not selling Dr. Pepper. We are selling the real thing. We are the Coca-Cola of this argument. Ours is the truth. And that's what we must march forth to try to market. I defy anyone to watch what we watched and not be moved. There are people in this audience still crying now from what they saw 10 or 15 minutes ago. I can see them. And I might make you cry some more, but not because I want you to be sad, though sadness is important. The heart which cannot feel is a dead heart. As Comandante Che Guevara, the great revolutionary, said, the human being must be capable of trembling with indignation against any injustice, against anyone, anywhere, anytime. We have to tremble with indignation at what we saw on that screen. Sadness will not be enough. Determination is necessary. But before I go on, I must say I'm increasingly shocked by the story of what happened here in Dallas to these people of the Holy Land Foundation. I was dimly aware of this case before I started coming to America now, as I do every week. Every week I'm here from Sundays until Wednesdays, back and forward across the Atlantic. And I was dimly aware on the other side of the ocean about this case. I've become more aware of it the more time I've spent in the United States. But as I stand here in Dallas, I have to say it's one of the most monstrous injustices in modern times in America. And we must take this story across this land and across the world. These people are living martyrs. They are the people who tried to feed the hungry and to clothe the naked and to come to those imprisoned in the biggest open air prison in the world, the biggest concentration camp in the world. What could be more holy than that? It's in the scripture, it's in the Gospel of Matthew, the extent to which it is a duty on human beings to do that. And for that duty, these men are facing terms of imprisonment so obscene as to be almost unbelievable. A 70-year-old man sentenced to 15 years in prison. A man sentenced to 65 years in prison for raising funds to feed hungry people and to clothe naked people and to house those whose houses had been destroyed. Well, I give you my word that I will take the story of the Holy Land Foundation everywhere across the world until they're free. although my name is George, and I come from Britain, I don't want you to think I'm trying to recolonize you. I'm here to stand shoulder to shoulder with you. I hate empire. As half an Irishman, I have to hate empire. When I was at school, the teacher showed us a map where most of the world was pink. It was nothing to do with gay pride or anything like that. This was the color of the British Empire. 1/5 of the entire land mass of the world lived under the British flag. 1/4 of the population of the world lived under British rule. The teacher told me that Britain had an empire so vast that upon it the sun never set. But as my Irish grandfather used to say, that's because God would never trust the British in the dark. And I never had cause to doubt him about that. So I hate empire. And empires exist, in the words of George Orwell, in his first novel, Burmese Days, drawing on his experience as a British colonial official in Burma. He said, it's quite a commonplace observation, but nonetheless profoundly true. He said, empires at the end of the day are about going to other people's countries and occupying them in order to steal their things. That's what empires are for. It's what they were for. It's what they still are for. So I am against all empire. And of course I'm not responsible for the crimes of the British Empire, but I have to acknowledge them. And I have to try to expiate them. And nowhere more is there a crime committed by the British Empire than the authorship of this whole Palestinian tragedy. In the building where I sit and have sat for 23 years, as an elected member of the British Parliament, 5 times elected, I have to pass every day the room in which the Palestinian disaster was written, where Mr. Balfour, the British Foreign Minister, in his famous declaration, in an act brazen even by imperial standards, on behalf of one people, promised to a second people the land that belonged to a third people, which at the time that he made the promise, even in imperial terms, was not Britain's gift to give. And from that disaster, in the building I sit, has flowed all of the tragedy of the Palestinian people, the latest chapter of which we watched on the video. But as I said in my speech during the Gaza war in the Parliament, which can be seen also on YouTube, this disaster didn't start on the 27th of December last. It didn't even start 42 years ago in 1967. It started, as Brother Mahdi said, more than 60 years ago. In that debate in Parliament, all the members were standing up and telling the country that they'd all visited an Israeli town called Sderot. I was astounded so many British parliamentarians had been to Sderot. It's not exactly Athens or Paris. But I asked them, when you were there in Sderot, did you see the ruins of the Palestinian villages on which it's built? Did you see the bones of the dead of the Palestinians who were killed in order to build this town of Sderot?